Hey, welcome guys. We have a very, very exciting episode here. Actually, our very first episode of our Seeds of Awareness podcast, and you'll also be able to find this on the Seeds of Awareness YouTube channel. What an honor it is to have on our inaugural episode a man who's been a massive role model for us for nearly 2 years now. And we're very excited to have him in our home, in our hometown up here in Byron Bay.
On our couch.
On our couch. And we've just completed a workshop with him. He's currently in Australia running a series of workshops. But a little bit of background. His name's Philip Shepherd. He's from Canada. He's got a background in theatre and a background in many things we've discovered. Can even build a house on his own. And he is an author of two books that have been incredibly transformative for us. One called New Self, New World, one called Radical Wholeness. He's an internationally renowned authority on embodiment, and he also runs workshops all around the world. He teaches people his training method. And he, as I said, he's currently in Australia running a series of workshops. We just did one just on the weekend. He's about to run another one up in Cairns next weekend before running a retreat. I've been immersed in his work for a little while now, and it has absolutely no comparison, or very little comparison to actually immersing in his work in the workshop. Actually experiencing his teachings on an embodied level has just been, I think we're still sort of integrating, but it has just been absolutely amazing. But before I go on, I want to pass it over to Philip to give a bit of an introduction on himself. In your book, Radical Wholeness, you talk about how at about age 18, you were at a fork in the road, and so to speak, and that you were called to go off on an adventure, and that it was a risky adventure to sort of any degree, and you say a part of you didn't even know if you would make it back alive, yet you knew that if you stayed in your culture you would die a more certain type of death. Now that to me are powerful, powerful words, and I'd just love for you to sort of elaborate a bit more on your background and talk a little bit more about your experience on that adventure and what it showed you about your culture and about yourself.
Yeah, what initiated, what made necessary that adventure was my gut. I mean, I would phrase it now. Then I was aware of this rage deep in my body. I mean, down in the pelvic floor, down the perineum. It was the sense that my aliveness, my freedom, my sense of being were being corroded, were being compromised by my culture. I mean, it's not that I had a terribly rough go of it. It's that the very precepts into which I'd been born, the values that says up is good and down is bad. There's an in and out that are defined in an arbitrary way by our culture, and ultimately any culture, when you put all of its elements together, they compromise a story of what it means to be human. So I was being instructed by my culture about what it means to be human in a way that was undermining who I knew myself to be ultimately. And I raged against it and realized that there was this fork in the road, as you say. I could been accepted to study physics, which I loved, at the University of Toronto, and then there was this phenomenon, Japanese no theater, which I'd seen once, and it had shaken me to my core with its restrained beauty and its power. And I was 18. I didn't have any money or anything, but it seemed that if I went to England and bought a bicycle and got on the bike and started pedaling, and I was headed in the right direction, and I didn't stop pedaling, I'd get to Japan. And, turned out to be true. But, I mean, there was a certain what the heckness to it, There was a certain, let's see what happens, because I know what'll happen if I stay here. And you're right, I didn't. I mean, how do you conceive of cycling alone through the Middle East as a teenager and think everything will be fine? You gotta understand that there's a risk, and I was just determined actually at that age that if I did go down, that I'd be strong enough to go down fighting, and let it unfold as it will. And on a bicycle, you are so wide open to the world around. You're not looking at the world through a windshield. You are smelling it and tasting it and present to the people you pass. And all of that sifts through your being, and I adjusted so easily to every culture I went through. You could sense where the boundaries were, where there's a modesty that is a truth when you're in another culture, where you're open to their cues. And so I felt all these other cultures, and every one of them was luminous and beautiful, and every one of them was limited. And when I came home, I was away 2 years, and I discovered, why no theater was such a mystery to me, because the Japanese have this concept hara, which means the belly, but it doesn't mean the belly, because in our culture the belly, is this area that's prone to indigestion, and source of embarrassment or a source of vanity or whatever. I mean, we have this very strange relationship to the belly. And in the Japanese culture, hara is the place where you come home to yourself. It's where you ground yourself in your deepest truth. And so in no theater, every gesture, I mean, I'd never seen an arm move from that intelligence. I'd never seen a head turn and see from that place. That's why no theater, at its root, had such a profound effect on me. It achieved a harmony that was not possible without that intelligence. So then, when I did come home, I was able to question my culture. And the most difficult thing in the world is to question assumptions that you've taken into your body from an age before you could even formulate a question.
And you talk a lot about in your book, one thing that really resonated with me was this concept of humanity having a primary wound that we're all experiencing. And that this primary wound creates a divide between our head and our body and our thinking and our feeling. And that actually changes the framework and how we experience reality. And it was just phenomenal for me in the workshop with some of the exercises bringing us back to this place of feeling every single moment anchored in the present moment and so attuned to the energies around us and the senses so alive. Like my hairs are standing up just thinking about it, and I know that experience will live on with me for the rest of my life. And your workshop, you allowed us to start becoming aware of the patterns of tension, of the patterns that we hold in our body that keep us in our heads, and patterns that have been invisible to us our whole lives because we haven't had that separation from our culture. As you said, we're born into it, our parents did it, we're taught that way at school, we're just taught to view the world through the framework of the head. And so this creates, as you say, all this fragmented sort of perception of the world, which can create so many issues and distortions, and we focus on all the individual issues, thinking that if I just fix this area of my life, I'll be whole, or if I just fix that area of my life, I'll be whole. Whereas for me, it's just so amazing having this one focus of coming back into this harmony of coming back into my own wholeness by bridging these two, this major sort of schism, as you call it. And it's just been absolutely profound. Like, I think it's without without sort of making you embarrassed, it's just genius. I think. So I would love for you to elaborate a bit more on this primary wound and how it affects us.
Yeah, it's the wound. It's not a wound in humanity so much as in our culture. It's a wound. Our culture gives us messaging in so many ways. The head should be in charge. The head will sort it out. The body is a vehicle. The body should be put in order by the head. And what happens, as a child in school, you sit at your desk and your body's intelligence, your body's energy will get you in trouble unless you actively suppress it. And you're instructed to fill your head with this knowledge dissociated from the body. It's just abstract knowledge, and with that you will achieve success. And you think about that lesson, that primary lesson. When you look at education, that is what it's teaching. As well as arithmetic and spelling, that is the primary lesson it's teaching. And it gets you, at the age of 5, and it has you every year, like 9-10 months of the year until you're 16, 17, 18. And you learn to separate your thinking from your being, and you buy in to this very strange notion that you can think more clearly with a small portion of your intelligence than you can with the whole of your intelligence, or the whole of your being. And only now research is actually being done that demonstrates that the whole of your being is vastly more attuned to reality, that there is this preconscious or unconscious layer manifest through the body that attunes to cues too subtle for the conscious mind even to notice, but it registers them. So scientifically it's an error, let alone an error for our culture on a grand scale.
And you think about the implication of that for young children, as young as 5 years old, and they live through the body, and then they go to school, and the body is something that we're taught to suppress. And then as children get a bit older, based on our culture, it becomes, and I'm speaking particularly for young women with this work, is the conditioning all around that to conquer the body and manipulate the body, and the head, wills the body into submission, and that just exacerbates this wound, and it's just frightening, and I guess that's why this work is so important, because we can get so lost up in our head, and disconnected from our body because of our culture.
And it breeds addiction.
Yeah.
And the reason it breeds addiction is because when your thinking dissociates from your being, you leave this hole. Where the connection with your being is what connects you with the world and brings you into your wholeness, and then and then there's this hole in the self that needs filling.
Yes.
And it, you can fill it with food, with distractions, with gambling, with drink, with drugs, there are any number of ways, and with control, right? You can try to assert control over that emptiness, because our culture tells you control is what you need. And even you think about self-mastery. You know what a lovely idea that is, until you realize, now let's see, if the self is mastering the self is making a slave of the self. There is no self-mastery without self-enslavement. And it's such a different thing, the mastery that enables you to surrender to the present and be nourished by it and guided by it.
And there's such a difference. Like, one thing I think the most profound thing in the workshop for me was, there's such a difference between getting these concepts with your mind or with your head and actually experiencing them in your body. And feeling
what it's like to experience the whole world through the body.
Yeah. And so, yeah, feeling what it's like to be guided by the subtle energies of the present, and to completely surrender to them. And the feelings, honestly, the feelings that came over my body were feelings that I think I thought I could only get from a drug or something like that. And it made me think, like, this place of wholeness is our true home, and on even if we're not aware of it, on some levels we're craving to get back there. So we're craving relief from this tension that comes from living in the head, and the anxieties and the disconnection and the fantasy that we're alone. And that's another thing that you say, is that wholeness is not something that can be contained in a boundary. And because if you extend my wholeness to be in relationship with that table over there, then you must extend the boundary, because that table is in relationship to all of the oxygen on this planet, and that's in relationship to, and it just keeps going. Wholeness is just infinite, and we're part of that flow. Everything's in relationship. Like, the illusion of this separation is just a fantasy of the head, isn't it? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, when the agenda is control, you need a boundary. And because what has no boundary is beyond control. And so we, as kids, we're sort of taken as seedlings and stuck in this pot of aloneness and said, grow there. You are alone, and be independent. There's no such thing as independence, but we're told to be independent. And what happens is, as soon as you buy into that sense of separation and aloneness, you feel that boundary around the self. And then this strange thing happens where you understand your experience to be personal rather than shared. And that's obvious to us in our culture, that everything I experience is my personal experience. It's not shared. Well, everything is shared. My very heartbeat affects the room around me. Everything is shared. The world is passing through me, holding me in my reality in so many ways. But once you feel your experience as private rather than shared, then your primary responsibility becomes to manage your experience. And so our culture becomes a self-centered, selfie-taking, self-supervised, self-conscious culture. And we're looking for the right ideas to supervise that private experience to make it good. And there are no ideas that will make it good. And a lot of the, God bless it, but a lot of the New Age movement is saying, these outdated, old ideas, they don't work. You need these new ideas instead. So it's all still within this top-down modality dogma, idea-driven, head-driven modality that we don't seem to escape. And as soon as your primary job becomes supervising your personal experience, then your primary relationship in the universe is with the self.
Yeah.
And you live with self-consciousness as a given of your existence. And self-consciousness is anti-life. It's like you've got this spotlight of your attention or your awareness that could illuminate the world and bring you into relationship with it, but instead you turn that spotlight on yourself and you leave the world in darkness. And we live an impoverished existence, frustrated and feeling entitled to more without realizing that the more is there, and what enables it or facilitates it is a surrender out of that boundary we hold around the self into the reality of the self as borderless. Your wholeness is not contained within your skin. It is borderless. And to begin to attune to that borderless reality of the self is to bring your life into focus.
I love that because as many of you know, I battled a severe eating disorder as a teenager, and anorexia is the epitome of the need for control and of it just highlights the split between mind and body. And I found that I was so stuck in my head and because of that, so separate from the outside world. I couldn't heal. I couldn't connect with my body, and I couldn't connect with the healing and the support of the world and the people all around me. And, through learning how to break down these armors that I developed between me and the world, and stop putting so many controls in place to shield myself, that's when I started to heal. And the more you drop into your body and the more you start to then be able to connect with the healing all around, which isn't just people and healing modalities, but it's in observing nature, it's in connecting with the ocean when you're sitting there and realizing that you're a part of something so much greater than this small little self. And it's funny because it almost makes a little bit humorous our neuroses, because when you're sitting there and you're out of this prison and you're in the vastness of your being and the universe,
and what our culture tells us is that the prison is where you live, and you should put the jailer in charge of your life. And so the jailer is there trying to supervise your way to freedom within the confines of the prison. It's an absolutely impossible catch-22.
And our culture also tells us that we're the ones who have the problem for not aligning with our culture. And so we feel shame and we judge ourselves. And probably the greatest genius of yourself is to have that ability to question your culture and question these hidden messages that are ingrained so deeply into our body that we just think a human is human life. And I've got a quote here from your book that I feel summarizes beautifully what we're saying. So it says, "The body feels the currents of reality in their yielding, rich and changeable aliveness. By attuning to those currents, the body attunes to the relationships that guide the unfolding of the present. It feels those relationships as part of a subtle web in which every thread holds and answers to every other. This web is reality. Nothing stands independent of it. There's only unfolding relationships." for me, like at the workshop, having an embodied experience of being a part of this relationship of wholeness and being held by it and being able to surrender to it, and the big theme of your workshop is to actually receive from it, because in our culture we don't allow ourselves to receive, and it could be as simple as receiving the beautiful color of blue coming off your shirt and receiving that into my body and allowing that energy to hit me in my core and ground down around my pelvic bowl, and to feel the air on my skin and the oxygen coming into my lungs, which are a gift from the trees, and to breathe out and offer my gift to the trees, which is carbon dioxide, and to receive the beautiful warmth of the sunshine, and to receive the softness of this carpet on my feet. All these things, this richness that's there available to us, that you say we desensitize ourselves to, and I can totally see that. We go through life completely desensitized, and so we're looking for aliveness, but we're looking at it through artificial channels. We're looking for peak experiences, but the peak experience is there in the ordinary moment. We've just been so numb to it because as you say, we're taught from such an age just to dull that body's energy. Like, one thing that I noticed in the workshop was how alive my body's energy is. It's just vibrating through me and pulsating, and it's just moving, and it's flowing, and it's just brilliant, and it's there all the time. Whether I tune into it, it's there. It's not that it turns on or off. And and the thing is that we don't have a place to ground that energy. That's the other genius of your work, is we don't have somewhere to ground that energy if we do tap into it, so we don't know what to do with it. And to be able to ground that down in the pelvic bowl, where it accepts it and it integrates it into our being, just incredible. Can you please elaborate a little bit more on that aliveness and richness and sensitivity that's available to us?
Yeah, to me that is the Eden from which we've exiled ourselves. The knowledge, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, is that judgment that separates us from the world, separates us from the body. And Eden is there. And that intelligence of the body, it manifests as energy, and it can feel dangerous. That energy can feel dangerous if you don't know how to ground it. It can become like a lightning storm. And so it feels safer, especially with our culture telling us. I mean, you think of how much shame there is around the body. How, even to speak of the body's intelligence is to raise an eyebrow. What do you mean, the body's intelligence? The body is how we know the world. I can look at this cup across the room and know what it is because I've held it in my hand. I felt the texture, the weight, I know it through my body, and we forget that the body's intelligence is seamlessly connected to the world. And that connection is an unending flow of energy that is information. And we agonize in our lives about sorting out what we should do and how we should do it, and here are the pluses and here are the minuses, and even when you finally come to a decision, you're not sure, is it the real, is it the right one? And meanwhile, there's the body's intelligence that just knows. And it's not that the variables around a decision are immaterial. It's that if they're unintegrated, they will stand between you and your clarity. And that integration, again, this is something our culture doesn't know, that an idea brought down through the body will integrate. It will land and rebirth itself as a sensitivity. And again, sensitivity is something our culture, well, it's nice to have sensitivity, but not too much. gosh, sensitivity is the foundation of our intelligence.
And I want to just focus in on that. So at the workshop, Philip discussed this notion of intelligence in our culture, and the head-centric culture would say that intelligence is abstract thinking.
An analysis.
It's analysis, and you see, people in, those professions, and they're intelligent because, they've got white collars and they can think and they can solve problems through their intellect. But Philip, you define intelligent differently. Do you want to...
Yeah, and it's not in any way to demean abstract reasoning.
No.
It's fabulous, but it's like this tiny little spectrum on this vast array of sensitivities. Any sensitivity, whether it's to a child's tears, or to the sound of rain on the roof, or to the tulip pushing up through the ground, or to arithmetic relationship, any sensitivity is a form of intelligence. But a sensitivity by itself is reactive, necessarily. If the retina didn't react to light, we wouldn't see. But that reactivity can only make the information it's accessing coherent when it is grounded. And groundedness just means embedded in the whole. So either a sensitivity is grounded in the wholeness of the body, or it's grounded through the body in the wholeness of the present. But when a sensitivity is grounded in that way, it's like the information it has comes into relationship with the whole and comes into proportion with it. So it newly sensitizes the whole in some way, even as the whole takes it out of its independent existence. So I think of those flocks of starlings that just lift and condense and ripple through the sky like an organism, and to bring a perspective or an idea into relationship with the whole, to bring a sensitivity into relationship with the whole, is like bringing a starling into the murmuration, and the flock adjusts to the individual, and the individual becomes the flock.
That's beautiful.
And we see this this intelligence all throughout nature. Like the intelligence of nature is just absolutely startling, but when we look at it through the alone, or the fragmented intelligence of the head, disconnected from the body's knowings, as you said, we're not demonizing the intelligence of the head and abstract thinking. It's a crucial part of our being. But when we only view the world through that lens, then we sort of compare the world to what we judge as intelligence. So, for example, we may, we see all examples of brilliance in nature, like this simple example of a spider spinning a web. I mean, what brilliance! And that web is based on sacred geometry, and some of the angles and the engineering of the web is just remarkable. But that spider, as far as I know, didn't go to a web engineering school. It didn't get taught even by its mum. It just knows how to do it. It just as the whales that migrate past us every year know from their bodies how to travel thousands and thousands of kilometers to go to Antarctica every year to find fish and find their way back. And yet we see examples like this everywhere in nature, but if we're looking at it through the head alone, we may look at that and go, that's impressive, but look at our giant nets that can catch 1,000 fish in one go in the sea. Look at that's impressive, the whales, but look at our GPS that can pinpoint a direct location on a map and take us there, or look at our skyscrapers we can build. And so we sort of worship this intellect of the head and kind of like brush aside anything else, but we have that same knowledge and intelligence in nature is also within flowing through us.
Yeah, we because we're so attached to this boundary around the self, because we're so attached to the fantasy of independence, We want human intelligence to be a special category. And so, well, it's not really like nature or anything else. It's special. And so we want to believe that it's this self-generated phenomenon and that the brain is essentially a computer in the head. And the very nature of intelligence is an emergent phenomenon. So you look at an ant in a colony, and an ant on its own is aimless and lost. But you look at that ant within the context of the colony, there is an intelligence that emerges. It's not that it's an additive function of all the little bits of intelligence in each ant adding up together to no, that you cannot find the intelligence of a colony anywhere in the individual ant. It emerges and it guides the colony with a harmony that is breathtaking. And we want to believe that this almighty computer in the head that actually doesn't exist, I mean, it's just not a computer, that's not how it works, is the supreme accomplishment of nature and entitles us to run rampant over nature's intelligence in exactly the same way that we run rampant over the body's intelligence. The way we relate to the body is exactly how we relate to everything else in the world.
Yeah.
It's a top-down relationship.
Well, it's actually a very good segue into the next quote I was going to read, which is, our relationship with the body, this is from Radical Wholeness, mind you, our relationship with the body is our fundamental relationship, is the template for all other relationships. And I can totally relate to that. Once you change where you're experiencing the world from and where you're receiving the world from, everything does seem different. Yeah. And I remember yesterday during the workshop going for a walk for lunch, and we'd just done an exercise that really grounded us in our pelvic bowl, and the sensitivities that I was feeling, just as you were saying, like walking past a mother pushing a baby in the pram, and someone walking their dog, and two ladies having coffee, and just these seemingly mundane things were just hitting me in my core. And I was like, oh my God, just every moment there's this aliveness and richness. And it was, as you say, we feel when we're in this place, we feel everything we see. We don't just see the sights with our eyes or hear the sounds with our ears. We feel it in our core, and that is just a fundamental shift. Like, that is so paradigm shifting, especially when you experience it. And yet there are the cultures in the world where this is just their normal way of experiencing the world. We think this is a big shift, whereas in reality this is just the normal way, our home kind of state of experiencing the world from a place of wholeness that we've just become blind to and forgotten.
In our culture, it's what it means to be human. That experience. Okay, that's what a human being
Yeah.
is. And the body fundamentally, basically knows it belongs to the world. It belongs to the trees and the animals and the sky. The body understands that. And the head knows in principle that it belongs to the world, but sort of not really. Because really your life is this private experience that has an independence from the world around you. So that relationship of the head to the body, it's like where your center of awareness lives in your body determines what you will see when you open your eyes on the world. So if your center of awareness is in the head, you will see this world as an aggregate of individual bits and pieces, and that's the reality that you open your eyes on.
And it's a known relationship.
It's a known relationship. You know what that is. You know what that whatever is. And then to have that drop down, so the center of your awareness actually arrives on the pelvic floor, so deep within your being. And then there is seamlessness. And it's not that the world becomes a sort of featureless wash of oneness. No, the specificity of everything is felt with such sensitivity, and it's a sensitivity that is known through your felt relationship, not through an abstract known relationship.
And
Can I just wanted to with dropping into your body. So I think there's a lot of people out there, as we were talking about addiction, where the body is actually a really frightening place. Inhabiting the body, you know, we store so much in the body, accumulated over years, you know, childhood wounds, tension, fear. We might have physical pain in the body. And for me, it's taken, I wouldn't have been able to sit through one of Philip's embodiment workshops 2 years ago, because I would have probably not been ready to be in my body that much, because of all the stuff I just stuffed for years down. Philip, I was wondering if you could provide some guidance or thoughts on about how people can slowly start to come back into their body and reconnect with their core, so that they can experience wholeness and then experience the pleasures that come with being whole, which then reinforces people wanting to stay in the body. And further, another point is I want to make is at the workshop, a lady asked with what to do with the emotion in the body. Like, do you just breathe until you get it out of you, or like what do you do when you encounter deep grief in your gut that you're used to drinking, having a few shots to make go away, or what do you do when you feel this anger that from a comment your father made 3 years ago that drives you to chain smoking? Like, what do you do? How do you process that?
Yeah. While your culture's prohibitions live in your body, you can't. It's that simple.
Yeah.
And there are prohibitions against feeling the breath, against letting your energy settle. I mean, our culture says up is good and down is bad, and so our energy gets higher and higher in the body, and that's not where energy belongs. You're looking up today. Even to be told that sort of brings your energy just a little higher, and you're by doing so you're disconnecting a little further from the body. And energy belongs at rest on the earth. Any energy that's held in the body is, the way I feel it is, it's a form of resistance to the present. And so to begin to understand the prohibitions of your culture is to begin to forge another way of being, which is really what my work is about, because as I see it, all the major problems we face as a society are problems that come back to our way of being, which is head-based, top-down, restlessly craving and demanding and needing more, always more, as if the planet could grow bigger as our demands placed on it increase. It's insane. The planet is finite. It's a delicate harmony that sustains the currents of life on it. And until you feel that delicate harmony sustaining your life, which again is a prohibition our culture warns against, because we are a special case. There are humans and there are animals, and we're not animals, we're humans, and they're not humans, they're animals. And this, the brotherhood with all living things, we are family on this earth, and we cannot come into harmony as a family until we come into harmony with the body and our own energy.
And because when we feel something, then we naturally sort of feel a gentleness towards it. Because back to what I was talking about before, how I was walking down the street during the workshop and feeling things that the past me, and mind you, I've this is still something I need to work on, because I can still feel patterns of tension in my body that get me out of that whole state. But in the workshop, like during this experience, when I was feeling the mother and her baby and the person walking their dog and the two ladies having coffee, in the past my head would have just been like, I know what that is. That's a lady walking a dog. I don't need to feel that. I don't need to feel those ladies having coffee. I don't need to feel the colours of that tree coming at me. I don't need to feel the patterns of those clouds. But when we do feel it, we, as I said, we feel this aliveness, but we also feel this connection and this gentleness towards it, and this feeling of like we're in relationship together, and I want to be in harmony with you. I want, is that making sense?
Yeah.
So like it's the same with this planet. When we feel when we allow ourselves to feel the planet and nature, then we're naturally going to have a lot more gentleness towards it.
Gentleness is fundamentally the quality of felt relationship.
Yeah.
If there is not gentleness, then you are stunting your felt relationship, and then you defer to no relationship. And that quality of felt relationship is the means by which we come to self-knowledge. So again, we've got this boundary around the self, and we think, oh, self-knowledge, I just have to reach down inside myself and find my truth, and it's not there. Sorry, people, it's not there. But we've turned self-knowledge into a kind of objective knowledge, and inner work is crucial because there are these patterns that constrict our intelligence and stunt our sensitivity, and you've got to find those and soften them and allow that boundary around the self to become more and more permeable until you soften into your true reality. But self-knowledge is born in you by felt relationship. So you see that mother with her baby and you are illuminated in a certain way. You come to know yourself in a certain way. Or you see the woman walking her dog, or you see a tree. You come into felt relationship with the world around you, and who you are is illuminated. Without felt relationship, we have no self-knowledge. And when we have no self-knowledge, knowledge becomes lethal. Knowledge, every problem we face, pollution and climate change and poisoning the earth, and every major problem we face is a result of knowledge. And we live with this undercurrent in our culture that says knowledge will save us, knowledge will save us, and knowledge without self-knowledge is lethal.
And it's an exercise that really touched me that we did at the workshop, which kind of broke down these walls between each other, is like you talk about presentation mode, and we live in a culture where we meet someone in the street and we present ourselves, hi, how are you? And you're coming from the head, you're thinking about what to say, you're not connecting with the other person, you're not feeling them, you've got walls up. And one of the exercises we had to do, and we worked up to this exercise because it takes really tuning into the body and dropping, and in the exercise we were with a perfect stranger, and we had to stare them squarely in the eyes and just hold their gaze and hold their presence. And the first time you asked me to do the exercise, I was so anxious, because it made me realize how much of an arm's distance I put up between myself and others just from the way I've always been. Just so much fear comes up, like I've been seeing. And at first, I was looking down and I couldn't connect, because instantly when you connect with another person who is connecting with themselves and allowing them their being to connect with your being, the power and the feeling and the intensity and the love, like you cannot help but fall in love with who you're staring with. And it happened with every single person I did this exercise with. I nearly wanted to cry, because I saw me reflected in them, and suddenly I understood so much about me, and then I understood so much about them. The empathy that comes from this connection, like ultimately you can't harm anyone when you're from this place, and you make better choices about your relationship, when you relate to the world, because
and you're not even, in a sense, you're not even making choices. You're guided in the same way that the ants in the colony are guided. That guidance is always there, and you're impervious to it if you're living in the head. And you drop down and dilate into your being, and suddenly it's there in every moment, ready to help you forward.
So for people, and I can sort of think for myself in the past, like when I'm hearing this information or reading your book, and let's say I've relied my whole life on known relationships. I've relied my whole life on knowing what things are and what place they are in my life, and knowing how to manage them, and knowing what to do so that I acquire what our culture defines as success, which is, as you say, our definition of success is the ultimate independence, to kind of have the most money, have the most acquisition of things, so that we can separate ourselves from reality as much as we can.
The biggest and the best.
Biggest, highest tower, most furthest away from nature, maids and butlers doing everything for us, with people filing our nails for it.
Yeah.
But that's like the extreme version of what sort of we're sold as the vision of success. And so we follow this, and so we disconnect our ability to feel things, because we don't think that is going to help us with this success that we have been conditioned to sort of strive for. And so, but in my experience, however, because I've definitely gone down that path, I played professional sport for 8 years. I chased everything my culture told me was success: money, women.
You went to lots of parties
fame,
in Las Vegas. That's just to show you that.
Las Vegas multiple times. Drugs, all things that I thought this is life. This is what's going to bring familiar.
And I'm entitled to this.
I'm entitled.
Yeah.
And this puts me higher up the hierarchy. This makes me more and being highly ambitious. And so I cut off my ability to feel the world around me. And I did acquire quite a few things. But it got to the point where not only had I built up this chronic addiction to sleeping pills, but I was also just feeling hollow. I was feeling anxious. I was feeling afraid of losing what I had, because if you lose all this stuff that you've acquired, you're not you anymore. And I was feeling afraid, and I didn't know how to connect with people, and I would it was just a horrible place to be, even though I had everything I thought that I wanted. And I think a lot of people in the world are starting to sort of wake up to this. They're starting to see that, like, this path that we've been led down by our culture, it's taking us away from our humanness. And the real aliveness that we're looking for, and the real peace is there in each ordinary moment. But when we, as you say so clearly in your book, is when we know something, when we say that's that, and that's where that thing's place is in my life, we don't have to feel it anymore. And that it was brilliant what you said at the workshop yesterday. An idea, when we know something, it crystallizes energy, just like water is frozen when you put it in a freezer. It can't be fluid anymore. So you block that energy that's in your body, you block its ability to guide you, or you block your ability to feel it, and therefore you're not guided by it. And what's been a big shift for me is that this energy that's in my body that can guide me, that I can surrender to, is not, it's not just something that's kind of like, I'll just tap into it in meditation. I can use that in every practical thing in my life. I can use that when I'm driving the car. I can use that when I'm interviewing you. I can use that when I'm speaking to a stranger on the street. I can use that when I'm washing my dishes. And each moment, each of these ordinary experiences that we numb ourselves to because we know what they are, all of a sudden burst with aliveness.
And newness.
Newness.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what would you say to someone right now, as the nature pouring the rain down?
It's a gorgeous rainfall. Yeah.
Beautiful. What would you say to someone right now who's afraid to surrender to that energy within them, who is afraid to feel the aliveness of each moment?
I would encourage them to understand that fear is a fear of their own life. That if you're alive, you're not safe. And we chase this illusion of safety. And we chase the illusion of safety by barricading the world and ourselves against it. And safety doesn't... Nothing that is alive is safe. But there's this possibility of security. So we've been goaded to follow the aspirations of the tyrant. And the tyrant believes that safety can be found, or that through security, through safety, he can find freedom.
And that's usually in material things.
Yeah, it's expressed exactly the path you went down. And what happens is you're building yourself a prison. You know, if I'm secure enough, I'll be free, and that your identity becomes your stuff, and then any threat to your stuff is a threat to your personhood. It's just such a confused state. There is another way, that like the hero's journey of surrender, the hero understands that, you know, freedom isn't found in security. Security is found in freedom. That when you liberate yourself to that surrender, when you let go and come back home to this and to your shining truth that is illuminated by the world, in that security, safety isn't necessary. What matters more than safety is your aliveness to the moment. And those people who suppress their aliveness because it's frightening, to understand that the equation you're working on is, well, to be alive isn't to be safe. So therefore, maybe if I'm less alive, I'll be more safe. That's the underlying assumption, and it's, as soon as you say it, you see that it's not true. But it's hard when it's buried within your neurology and you can't even name it.
What was amazing again yesterday during the workshop was going outside, because we were in this beautiful setting near the trees in the park, and there were birds everywhere, and going outside and feeling that nature is all guided by this flow. It's all guided by this energy, and we're learning these concepts that seem foreign to us of wholeness, but really we're the only ones not coming to the party. This wholeness is everywhere. All of nature is guided by it. We are the only ones.
I don't think they'd invite us at this point with the way our culture is.
Well, With the invitation is we don't need an invitation.
No, we don't.
We are part of wholeness, but we just desensitize ourselves to it and like we look at nature and we're like, look at nature being all strange and look at those birds just sitting on that tree and
What for?
What for? Why sit on that tree? Why us humans here are doing important things? We're making money. We're building systems. We're building towers. We're doing important things. That bird's just a silly bird sitting on a tree. Oh, look at it now. It's just going to go look for walking along the ground and it's pecking somewhere. It's just so silly. Whereas that bird is guided by this energy and this aliveness and it's part of the flow. It's crazy to sort of start to shift your perspective and start seeing how much we've alienated ourselves from this natural state. And so I think we might start wrapping it up. I think the one thing that I really wanted to get from you also is this idea of the pelvic bowl, because I realized in the workshop I didn't fully understand it until I experienced it, and that we have this point of awareness in the head that you say is more of our male aspect of consciousness, and we've got the female aspect of consciousness, but the specific point of awareness of that is down near the perineum, a part of us that is very taboo and very shut away, but I notice in myself is so tense. Like when you showed us an exercise to release my stomach to allow my perineum to fill up with spaciousness and with air, I was like, oh, this doesn't feel nice. This feels like I'm bloated and like I look fat. And so like the very area that allows us to drop into our wholeness is the one area that we're conditioned to think needs to be tight and tucked in and strong and flat and tense and like, but when you have that tension, you can't drop into there.
And what is tense doesn't feel. You know, to hold anything in tension is to compromise its sensitivity.
So can you talk a bit more about where that actual point of awareness down in the pelvic bowl is, and just simple kind of just a little bit of explanation of it.
Yeah, it's like there is a landscape to the body's intelligence, and the ground of your being, experientially for me, is the pelvic floor. And the pelvic floor is like the surface of the earth, and the ground of your being, there is dark, mysterious, certain life there that is always on the move, and that is seamlessly connected to the life around you. And above that, in our culture, we fill the body's energy with anxieties and tensions and expectations. We always, to rest here is to undo the expectations that ceaselessly pull you out of the present. And so all that energy in the body is like, this area of the body to me is like the sky, and either it's clear or it's foggy or it's cloudy as the sky becomes, or there are thunderclouds and lightning storms going on. And experientially for me, all of that energy belongs in your core, in your center. And when the body is clear, there is room for all the world to pass through it and be felt there. When it's stuffed, there's no room for the world, and then all you have is the illusion of your personal experience rather than shared experience. So that journey down to the pelvic floor is a journey that brings you home to yourself, to the place where you rest in the present. The self is as borderless as the present. And until you can rest there, what the present has to offer you will be as fractured as your experience of the self.
Yep. Absolutely love it. Well, I think we're going to wrap up there. If people want to contact you, if they want to get in touch, where's the best place to do that?
My website, which is just philipshepherd.com. You know, I've designed it to support people in the work. So there are interviews there, I've got articles there, all kinds of stuff, exercises people can download, and you know, I'd love people to visit it and look a little more deeply into it. And of course, there's my first book and my second book, which you know, anyone who wants to sit with the material in that way, I think it's a pretty rich experience.
And I couldn't recommend his work any more highly. He's just been monumental in Matt and I's development, and we were pretty crazy. So we needed a lot of help. So I would,
Speak for yourself.
Thank you so much for that.
His new book, Radical Wholeness, you can see our very worn and tattered, respectfully worn and tattered, because it's been taken everywhere, on flights, on camping trips, it's had coffee spilt on it, but it's worn and well used with absolute love. He's also just released the audiobook version, which is himself reading, which he's got an amazing reading voice. The car rides or when you're doing the dishes, it's just absolutely perfect. And he also runs workshops, as I said, all around the world, and in between his busy schedule, he does Skype consultations for people who are interested in working one-on-one with him. I wanted to finish off just with a testimony that Paul Levy, wrote in your book that I really resonated with, because for Christmas I gave a copy to all of my family of this book, and I told them that when you feel like you need some support, this book is medicine, because it's really how I felt when I was reading it. It was just medicine for some of the answers I was searching for. And Paul Levy wrote in the book, "When Philip Shepherd asked me to look at his new manuscript, I was unprepared for the extraordinary experience that awaited me. Within minutes, I literally couldn't put his book down. Radical Wholeness was not just talking about, but was literally speaking to and invoking a deeper, more whole and healed part of myself. While I was reading, I had the overwhelming feeling that it is as if this book is a multivitamin and mineral supplement, real medicine secreted by the universe itself to help us heal our collective insanity. I can't recommend Wholeness highly enough." And I honestly couldn't put it in better words than that. That one testimony really resonated to how I felt when I was reading the book. And I just want to say thank you so much for your service to the world, and for your tireless efforts and your passion for bringing this to people, and your patience and gentleness. His workshops are next level. It's a whole different experience, feeling the shifts in your body than it is just reading the book. So if he comes to your town, or even fly across the world to go to one, it's that transformative. It's amazing. So thank you so much for being the very first person on our podcast.
What an honor!
Yeah, honor for us.
Absolute delight. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And we'll speak to you soon.
I look forward to it.
Yay!